All right, what's up? Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark. Tuesday, GC Live, Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans. He's not here, but he is our sponsor. ClintHammond.com, 803-422-6797, NMLS number 71597. Love Clint. If you're looking for a home, you're going to love him too. Hit him up right now, 803-422-6797. Sure, he's got some thoughts on, maybe this week's game, but probably wants to talk a little bit about this past week's game. Maybe look ahead to Clemson. Clint's your guy, man. If you're in the market, again, for a home, just hit him up. He'll walk you through the whole process and take great care of you just like he has for me. All right, happy Tuesday. We've got, of course, Beamer press conference. And then for those who didn't see the tweet, we are going to be joined by our good buddy, Charles Power. Always a great guest. Always somebody who brings the information. Honestly, one of the most just sharp, intelligent guys I've ever been around and ever seen when it comes to the combination of science and art that is high school recruiting rankings. So going to be joined here momentarily by Charles. But before we bring Charles on, Chris and I will give final thoughts on last week's game and then move ahead a little bit to what Beamer had to say today about the Wofford Terriers. And, I don't know that there's a whole lot of just breaking news in this press conference today, Chris, but we do at least have some time to look back on what was a game that still just has South Carolina fans buzzing. I think we hit most of it on Monday, but is there any more meat on the bone of stuff that you didn't provide us with on Monday?
There was one little moment, maybe more than one thing that stood out because Beamer did talk. I mean, the things, a little bit of Wofford, a little bit of injury talk, Wes, as far as the health of the team, which we can quickly update that if you want. But one thing that did stand out is, look, Lenoris Sellers has gotten his flowers, so to speak, since this game, deservedly so, with the numbers he put up, 5 touchdowns. And I think a lot of us have pointed out the big plays that he's made, the getting out of the sack and throwing the ball down the field to Brady Hunt. That probably stands out the most. But Beamer pointed out, hey, there's not a lot of people talking about the quarterback run in the fourth quarter. Missouri took the lead. Sellers comes out. They run design quarterback run. Looks like it's going to be a decent, 4 or 5 yard gain. Once again, Sellers breaks a tackle, goes and gets the first down, broke more than one tackle, got that drive going, and eventually South Carolina goes and regains the lead. Now, of course, Missouri went down and scored. Carolina had to answer. But I thought that was, I was like, listening to that, I was like, he's right, because I saw that play on the SEC and 60 West today while we were at the radio station at 107.5. That was a big play, right? So Lenoris Sellers, man, just continues to get better and better. He's winning. He just won, as soon as we came on, he won another award, the Maxwell National Player of the Week. So much deserved. He's making the special plays, but I think he's making big plays that really he just kind of makes look routine.
Yeah, and we'll talk to Charles, of course. I think we'll let Charles take a little victory lap on his evaluation
no
of
doubt.
Lenoris Sellers. I mean, good grief! Like we're seeing, we're kind of seeing a lot of the things that Charles predicted or sort of saw in him in high school as projecting ahead into college. We're seeing it all play out, and that's of course fun for the fans, but I'm sure fun for Charles as well to see kind of what he thought Lenoris could be starting to be the reality of who he is. And then I'm actually curious to see, is this exactly what Charles thought? Is there more, like, what is the upside? Is the upside even higher now in Charles's view? So we'll talk to him about that. Wofford, I'll be honest, Chris, I have not had a chance to completely just dive into who they are, what they're all about yet. Beamer, of course, had some good things to say about them. Talked about how difficult of a schedule they have played to this point in terms of teams at their level. Maybe the record doesn't quite tell the story of this Wofford team. Obviously, South Carolina heavily favored here, as you would expect, and a game that, let's just be honest, let's call it for what it is. From a Carolina fan standpoint, you're hoping to get a lead early, salt this thing away, and to put your backups in a position to go play and keep everybody healthy for next week. Like, that is not disrespect to Wofford to say that. That's just the reality. That is, whether you're going to say it in a press conference setting or not, which you're not, but that's one of the goals for this week, I think, is just to get the backups in there and get everybody else through it healthy.
Kind of seems like similar feel to the Akron game, Wes. Remember, we're kind of, you're going into that game knowing that you're going to be playing Robbie Ashford in that game. Not the same situation here, but you hope Lenora Sellers is sitting comfortably on the bench after a while in this one, among other players, right? And there's some guys from an injury standpoint, Wes, that maybe we don't see in this game. We know we won't see Brady Hunt. He's going to be out, which Beamer had already said. Had a non-contact injury towards the end of the Missouri game. So, unfortunately, he'll be out. But they had some other guys that, gotten banged up in the game or maybe went into the Missouri game not 100%. Well, one that stood out to me, Wes, mentioned that Jared Brown was a little banged up. You had pointed out Jared Brown on that screen pass, the touchdown run, healthiest he's looked in a while, which I agree. Looked great on that play.
So much for that.
I didn't see, and I don't know if Beamer didn't really specify, was it in game? Was it in practice? I don't know. But hopefully they can get Jared Brown back. This is a game where you're right. You want to go win. You want to win comfortably. But above all, I mean, you want to be able to get your backups in there and keep everybody healthy going into a big final game of the season, regular season finale up at Clemson.
Yeah, no doubt, man. And that was probably, I would say, the most newsy information from it was just the injury report. And yeah, you hate that for Jared, man, because it's been kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back for him in terms of just, and not any fault of his own, just kind of injuries here and there. Every time we've seen him kind of break out, I thought that, it was a good sign at the time that Carolina got him the ball on kind of that jet sweep as well, because I thought that was a sign of, all right, if they're getting him the football by just handing him the ball, letting him take some hits, then they feel pretty good at the time about his health. And certainly for Carolina, you want to hope you could get Jared back close to 100%, because he has, I think, been a little boost to that receiving core that has obviously had a lot of rotation throughout the year. I did not realize, by the way, Chris, that they do have odds on this game. They're hard to find. They're not on your typical, these days. It used to be that odds were like taboo for ESPN to even talk about. Now they have their own like book basically. And it's you just go to the schedule on ESPN and you'll see the odds, the lines for the games. And unless it is like an FCS game. So there is at least one book, at least one of the bigger books. FanDuel does place odds on South Carolina and Wofford. Have you seen this yet?
I have not seen the odds.
I was going to get you to guess, but USC Light has already given it away. Is that, we'll let you have the honor system. Is that close to what you would have guessed?
I think I would have gone a little bit lower, honestly. I mean, I probably would have gone like 35-ish range. It's kind of where my head went.
Yeah, 42.5.
That's a lot. That's
a massive line.
That is a massive line.
That's a massive line. And the over-under is only 49.5. So you're projecting basically like a 42-7 type game.
Yep.
Which I don't know. I mean that could happen, but that is a massive line to say the least. And I think for Carolina, you're hoping this is not one of those games where the other team, you just kind of sleepwalk a little bit and the other team kind of just makes you keep playing. You know what I mean? Like you want for some of these younger guys, or frankly, some of your older guys that haven't been playing as much to be able to get into this football game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you want, again, Sellers and others comfortably seated on that bench, not risking injury, chilling, letting the body rest, going ahead and shutting them down. And I think here's one little small thing. You're at the point in the season with 3 losses where you're trying to win out, you're trying to bolster your resume to look as good as possible for whatever, whether you're among the people that are still talking college football playoff, which South Carolina does have a chance, maybe not a great one, but a chance, or just bowl standing. And so you're sitting there going, again, not to disrespect Wofford, it's a game you should comfortably win. But how comfortably? So style points, you start thinking about that, right? I think everybody was dreaming of that against Missouri. Didn't end up happening. That's fine. Everybody's happy because you got to win in the thrilling fashion in which you got it. I think more important than style points, Wes, win the game, still win it comfortably, get people shut down early, whatever that means. And I think nobody in the building is going to say, yeah, we think we're going to be able to clear out the bench and play everybody in the second half. But nobody's going to say that. But I think certainly that is what everybody around the program is hoping for in this game.
Yeah, and at halftime in the Missouri game, you thought, hey, come out, score early. Maybe there is an opportunity for some style points. Obviously, as we know, that was just not meant to be. And I don't know, like I said the other day, it just probably would not have done it justice for this thing to be broken like that. You had to have, this is South Carolina. You had to have some drama, some excitement, and that's exactly what happened. So for Carolina, ended up producing one of the maybe more memorable moments some South Carolina fans have ever had, either watching at home or in the game at Williams-Brice Stadium on Saturday night. I do hope, Chris, and this is something Beamer talked about, I do hope it's a great crowd. I do hope they're in there early for all those seniors that Beamer talked about, because, when you're on an odd year, this is for Clemson. Clemson is your senior night a lot of times. This year, not quite as big of a game. So I do hope for all those seniors, the ones that walk or the juniors that walk, there will be a big early crowd at Williams-Brice Stadium on Saturday. So, all right, y'all, without further ado, let's bring in our good friend, Charles Power from On3. Charles, I feel as if, let me get this graphic off here. I feel as if it has been a minute, man. How you been doing?
Doing great. How about y'all?
We're great too, man. We appreciate you taking the time. I know always busy with new rankings and updating the rankings and just constantly trying to tweak those and get them as accurately as you possibly can. So I guess, first of all, Charles, real quick, tell us where we're at in the process right now for both 2025 class and then moving forward, kind of looking ahead to some of those underclassmen as well.
Yeah, so we just put out our really kind of mid senior season update for the 2025 cycle. So that's guys who are going to be signing here in a couple weeks. We try to get that one in before Thanksgiving. So that's a lot of that is senior season movement, and we'll have more of that senior season movement in our final ranking in January, which is going to come, after the full season, all-star games, postseason all-star games. And then after that, we're turning the page to overhauling 2026 and then our initial on 300 for 2027. So our February and March months are those are big rankings, and those are ones that take a lot of work. But I really enjoy this time of year the most because we're going through the senior seasons of these 2025 prospects, and it's a really good class, just a cycle nationally. But it's always fun to me. It's always fun to go through the senior year because you really start to see things crystallize just kind of late in the process. And this is a couple weeks before a lot of these guys are going to be enrolling. So you get like the last look of really kind of what you can expect to see from them as college football players.
Charles, we got to start you out with Lenore Sellers, right? I mean, I think we got to start there. I know you sent out some posts on X, Twitter about him today, just kind of looking back at what you liked, the On3's scouting report. Mm-hmm. And just to remind people, you ended up at On3 with Sellers as a top 100 player in the top 10 nationally in terms of quarterbacks. All other services had him as a 3-star. So you had him as a top 100 4-star, which ended up having him as a 4-star on the On3 industry ranking. So with Sellers, let's kind of reset like what you thought. And then based on what you've seen from him in year one as a starter, as a redshirt freshman, like how does that compare, to what you expected from him?
Yeah. So, it's funny. Like I remember coming on with y'all, I guess that December, like right after Christmas, and then again I think after signing day, and I think when I first came on, I think we had him. He was committed to he was committed to Syracuse when we made him a 4-star. He's like in the 150 range, and he had that crazy into his senior season, winning the state title. And really got better every week. I mean, he had his best games in the playoffs. So this is, just a hockey stick type of trajectory. And really, I think a pretty almost kind of rare, like you see that maybe once or so a cycle in terms of just at that quarterback. Like DJ Lagway was like that a little last year as well. Just phenomenal senior season. And man, I had a really high level of exposure to Lenoris that I think probably was unique to people in our industry or everyone else. And I think, to be fair, we put out our rankings first that year. I think a week or so after we put him in the top 100, I think ESPN made him a low 4-star. And I think Rivals also made him a low 4-star, which I found out today because we had that was so late in the process. I don't think our database had updated yet, but we were really high on Lenoris. And I think I had such a high level of exposure to him that it was like probably a rare level of conviction for me doing this, just given how much I saw from him. And guys, honestly, I don't know if y'all have seen the movie The Big Short, but it kind of felt like that. It's like, okay, we're seeing something here that maybe not everyone else is seeing. And, I mean, I guess unfortunately it wasn't the housing market, so we are drinking out of coconuts right now, but it's really good for, I guess, it worked out for South Carolina. And I think that's something we talked about at the time is if he's as good as we think he could be, this is going to go down as the biggest recruiting coup in the Shane Beamer era. And I think it's shaping up like that. I think it's safe to say it's looking like that right now. And it looks like South Carolina has their quarterback of the future and the present and the future. And really like a guy who's a potential program changer and one that I think they'll really try to build around here in the next, 2 years, 2 years plus, I guess, and try to build the roster. But man, I think everything he's doing right now, we saw him do as a senior in high school. I think you could say he's the toughest quarterback to tackle in college football. And I think he looked like that as a senior in high school. I mean, he broke tackles at an extremely high rate. And he's only gotten bigger and stronger since then. He's gotten more athletic. I mean, he was hyper athletic then. He's the best run threat quarterback in that cycle, which had a ton of top quarterbacks. And I think, I think it's a lesson for me and just us in terms of our scouting operation. I wish we had him higher. I had such a high level of conviction. And I think I told y'all after one of our shows, kind of after he had enrolled, if he had been in the 2024 cycle, he would have been a 5-star. I think he and Lagway and Julian Sayin probably would have been the top 3, and it would have been some order. But I think he's that level of talent, and I think we'll look back on that 2023 cycle, and I think he's got a good shot. If he continues his rate of improvement, as being a top 2 or 3 quarterback drafted out of that class, which is saying a lot because I think that's going to go down as a really good class. And to me, one of the hallmarks of Lenoris Sellers, just in addition to his physical talent, is he just has a rare capacity for improvement. And I think if y'all saw he had a quote last, I think after the Missouri game where he said something he was asked about learning from the Alabama and LSU games. And his quote was just complete growth mindset. It's whatever a psychologist would tell you, this is embodies a growth mindset. And I think he just, you never see him, when he makes a mistake, he rarely gets down on himself, and he always gets better and better. And I think if the results maybe didn't show to the level that South Carolina fans would have wanted the first couple games of the year, but it was disjointed. He was getting hurt in and out of games. I think his supporting cast was certainly up and down at times, and he was getting sacked a good bit. But if you really zeroed in on it, he was getting better every game, and he was showing improvement every game, and it just kind of exploded here after the bye week. And I think a lot of that too is, I think if you look at the sack stats, he got sacked maybe 4+ times a game before the bye week, and has maybe been sacked once since. Mm-hmm. So some of that's things slowing down for him, the O-line getting settled in. But man, I think if you're a South Carolina fan, you have to be just ecstatic. I mean, he's going to be, I think people are going to consider him as one of the top quarterbacks in the SEC going into next year. And obviously South Carolina's got a lot left to play for the rest of the season with, you have Clemson coming up, and then a big bowl game, or, if you could somehow back into the playoff, although the chances for that seem pretty slim. But yeah, I mean, I think, this is the quarterback I think South Carolina fans have been waiting on. And it's really, really interesting conversation as to how this staff is going to try to build around him, this upcoming offseason.
Yeah, for sure, man. And one of the other traits I think you saw to him in high school, and you just heard that senior year in the playoffs, how I think it was like the AC Flora game. It's like everybody in the stadium knew, all right, this is probably going to be some type of Lenoris run. And he was just basically putting the team on his back. And kind of that, to me, it's kind of just a very unique blend of, if you look at his body language on that final drive that Carolina ends up going down and beating Missouri, they zoom in on his face, and it's just stone cold, just hey, I'm just going to go do what needs to be done. And but also, I feel like he's one of those guys, you maybe don't see it from his body language, but when he's challenged, I think he actually goes to here, it felt to me like those final two drives, he's throwing lasers out there. And so I think that's kind of a rare trait, to be the guy that doesn't get too high or doesn't get too low if things are going well or going bad, but then also competitively to be able to go to a different place and take your game to an even higher level when you add in all the just natural gifts and the the work ethic, all those things. I feel like we could probably just do an entire show talking about the Lenoris Sellers special traits here.
Yeah, for sure. And to me, one thing as well, guys, I generally try not to play psychologist, but his intangibles were off the charts. And I remember I called his head coach at South Florence, Drew Marlowe, before our final rankings, and I talked to him for over 30 minutes, and I was just like, what am I missing here? What? And he's like, you aren't missing anything. He's like, I'm wondering what everyone else is missing. All these college coaches are missing. But yeah, I think he has all of that, and he's just steady really at all times, even when things aren't going well. But I think one thing for me, would just in terms of the quarterback evals, skill set wise, and Lenoris was always he was good at camps. You go back and watch all the Elite 11 video. He was good in 7-on-7. He only really played 7-on-7 with South Florence, but he's a guy who elevates his game when you put pads on him. Get him in a full contact type of setting, and he is a true football player. He's a football player who happens to be a really gifted quarterback. Whereas a lot of these quarterbacks, you put pads on them and their play might dip a little bit. They're not going to play through contact. So he's a guy who is best when he's live. In addition to kind of having all of the arm talent and athleticism he has. So that's one thing I kind of learned. And I think, college coaches go and see these quarterbacks, or a lot of times their exposure to them is on air. They see them in camps, on campus, or see them, throwing during the eval period. Of course, they're watching film as well, but I think it's really and this just goes for the media as well. I think it's really important to just emphasize how are these guys with pads on. And Lenoris Sellers is really kind of a monster with pads on.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, Charles, like Wes said, man, we could keep going on Lenoris and just do, an hour, maybe even a couple hours. So let's not do that.
Yeah.
Move on to something else. New rankings came out, as you mentioned. One of the risers for you that I definitely wanted to ask you about was Donovan Darden, out of Havelock, edge prospect, according to the rankings on South Carolina's board as a linebacker. Looks to me like he could do both. But Kid looks like a grown man. Eastern North Carolina kid. Havelock's been a good program for South Carolina, been a good region for them. What did you see out of Darden in his senior year that prompted you to raise him up in the rankings?
Yeah, so Donovan Darden has, I think, first off, a lot of physical traits, which edge is a traits position. He's 6'4", 225, 34+ inch arms, a former quarterback who's really kind of playing, full-time defense kind of later in his high school career. And he's had a really good senior season. I think when we did our rankings, I think he had 18 tackles for loss, really strong number. And the film's good too. I think, he's playing more on the edge this year. I could see him, I think once he gets in the strength program, I think I would probably think he'll outgrow linebacker. I mean, and then a lot of that's like scheme dependent as well, but he just has a bunch of traits. And I think, when you look at just his athleticism, the plays he makes plays behind the line of scrimmage at a really high rate. I think when we kind of stacked him up in that group, it was like pretty clear. Like I thought from just watching him in a vacuum, he's a likely 4-star. And then you kind of start to stack the group, which is kind of our rankings process of just stacking the group, putting them in kind of how we see the order. He kept kind of going further and further up when you just kind of take the full breadth of what he's done as a senior so far. So, obviously Havelock's a program that South Carolina's had a lot of success at. And I think Darden, his best football is certainly ahead of him, but he's playing really well as a senior. And I think kind of adding him to that group, you look at like a Jaquavius Dodd, another guy that we're high on. I think South Carolina is like really recruiting, defensive front seven at a level that it kind of is commensurate to how the front seven's played this year. Now, I don't like some of these guys I think are going to need some time to develop, but Darden is a prospect that I definitely would be excited about in South Carolina's class. And I wouldn't be surprised if we look up in a couple of years and he's a guy that we're talking about as a, one of the gems of the class. Like, I think we've talked about guys, like guys, in the past, like Nicky Manwari was a guy like that where, probably didn't get a ton of, recruiting talk necessarily because he was like, in the boat, low profile recruitment. I could see Darden kind of being a guy like that as well, just with his traits and how he's continuing to get better.
Charles, I'm going to ask this one a little bit more open-ended because really I could probably ask you about all the individual receivers, but I'll just kind of let you kind of run with it and talk about which guys you want to. But when you sort of look at, receivers, another position where I think they wanted to upgrade just their overall level of recruiting out of the high school ranks versus having to go quite so transfer portal heavy.
Yeah.
Of course, Malik Clark flipped him from Florida State, in-state guy, went up into Pennsylvania, Lex Cyrus, Jordan Gidron in the class, Brian Rowe, Pup Sellers here in state, and then potentially, if they get their way, Donovan Murph as well. Can you just kind of speak to that overall potential recruiting class there and maybe what you like about a few of those guys?
Yeah, I think that first off, that would be a really strong receiver group. And I think it's probably best to view them as a general group in that I do think that would certainly be a step in the right direction for upgrading the talent in the receiver room, especially like in terms of like type of high school players you're recruiting. I think Malik Clark out of that group is certainly the most like physically gifted. He has all of the measurables, an elite athlete. I think he's one of the probably top athletes at receiver, just in terms of the combine setting and just his arm length and kind of all of just the physical attributes. I think he's going to need some time to continue just working the technical part of his game, but he's had a good senior year and I'm looking forward to kind of continuing to evaluate him kind of within that receiver group nationally the next couple months. And Jordan Gidron has missed a good bit of time. Of course, Jordan Gidron and Donovan Murph are reclassifications, which I think that's kind of a interesting situation. Of course, like if you're South Carolina, you 100% want these guys. These are guys that are blue chip prospects, highly recruited from in-state. You always want those guys, but I would probably add a little bit of caution to the reclassification conversation as it goes to expectations for instant impact. Like it's just like a situation like Ryan Williams, who comes in and is like an impact player off of a reclassification. That's probably like really like a 1 in 50, 1 in 100 type of scenario. It's just not common. So I would stress that players who reclassify, you have to kind of temper your expectations and maybe not expect an instant impact. And if they do make an instant impact, it's really kind of a bonus. We just don't see that very often, if at all, other than like a rare case like Ryan Williams. But I think Gidron's been hurt a good bit this year. Donovan Murph, I think, is supposed to be at the Under Armour All-American Bowl. So looking forward to seeing him there. I think that'll be a good setting and test just to see him. Lex Cyrus, I think, is our highest ranked of that group. Outstanding speed. He's a field stretcher. I think he's a 10-4 100-meter guy, but also catches the ball well. So he's that was a big recruiting win out of Pennsylvania. I mean, Penn State coveted him. So to go in and get him out of there, I think he's our highest rated guy of that group right now. But it's a really good group. And I think, one thing that Donovan Murph would add, he's a ball winner. And I think that's something that South Carolina, when you look at their receiver group, I guess, especially guys on campus, I think that's something that they had probably need going into the next couple of years. I think when you look at their receivers, you have Mazio Bennett, who I think is looking really good as a true freshman, probably exceeding expectations as a true freshman in the slot. The emergence of Nick Harbor, which I think I kind of view Nick Harbor, despite his body type, as really like a Z. I mean, he probably, I think we talked about this before, he almost kind of has a skill set of like a 6'5", like Demir Bird. Like he's like a guy who is a constraint player. He draws a lot of we've seen him draw like pass interferences the last couple games, in terms of getting vertical. But I think South Carolina, in terms of potentially adding a guy like Murph, and then I think one priority for them out of the portal is trying to go get a true X ball winner, a guy that you can throw the ball to. Of course, like Sidney Rice and Alshon Jeffrey don't grow on trees, but a guy kind of with that type of skill set, I think would really complement the receivers they have on campus. But those guys are getting better the last couple of weeks. So I think you have to be encouraged with the receivers. But I think they're probably missing like one piece to really have a dangerous offense going into next year, to me.
Charles, another guy that you have as an outlier in the 2025 class is Jaquavius Dodd. And I know that we had talked about him one of the last times that we had you, and I think this was after his junior season. Mm-hmm. You like the tools, you like the production with double-digit sacks. If I'm not mistaken, he's wrapped up another senior year in which he had double-digit sacks. I think he currently checks in at number 85 nationally for On3. Thoughts on Jaquavius Dodd? Updated thoughts on Jaquavius Dodd?
Yeah, Jaquavius Dodd has a bunch of traits, and I think when you line him up in that edge group, there's not a lot of blue chip type of edge prospects who have that frame, the length, the twitch. I mean, he is a big time athlete. You see him play off ball linebacker and run around. I mean, he can really fly to the ball, and super disruptive. And I think the fact that he has that level of production, despite having a lot of room for development technically, is really encouraging. He's going out there and he's just winning off of his natural gifts. So I think the biggest thing with Jaquavius Dodd, I think he's going to really benefit from getting in the strength and conditioning program. But the biggest thing with him is he plays a little high. He's high hipped and just high cut. And I think once he works on his pad level, he gets in there like with Sterling Lucas and kind of works on the technical side of the game. His upside is probably higher than where we have him ranked. So we're kind of like splitting the difference here of a guy with a really high developmental upside. Also is a good player, but he could end up outplaying his ranking, I think, just given just the, he's like a 7 foot wingspan. He runs like a deer. So I think there's so many things about him that are really positive. But I think he's going to need some coaching. But I think when you just like I said earlier, with edge is it's a traits position. And I think when you look at guys like South Carolina, they're having success with. Kyle Kennard is a traitsy athletic, player who I think he was 200 pounds coming out of high school. He is. You look at him now, what is he, 250 maybe? Like Dylan Stewart, so many athletic traits. So I think Dodd is that type. Might need a year or so, but I think he has just an extremely high upside. And we've seen this so many times, guys, over the years with these types of prospects from South Carolina. And I think when you look at South Carolina's defense, so many of the players on the defense are in-state guys. And I think prioritizing and targeting high upside in-state prospects who are athletic and just have the level of on-field play as a guy like Jaquavius Dodd. That's really what the best South Carolina defenses are built around, those types of prospects.
Yeah, and Charles, if you go back and look, man, a staggering amount of the guys performing very well for this defense were kind of relatively like not highly recruited. I mean, like you look at Nick, and I know you had Eamon Worry as a 4-star guy, but if you look back at just how like the recruiting profile for him, it was not just everybody in the country coming after him. So
TJ Sanders is one like that. I would like TJ Sanders has really outplayed his ranking, and I think he'll probably I could see him being maybe like a day 2 draft pick. So yeah,
he's been phenomenal. I mean, OD Fortune's the guy who came in, camp offer, has just waited his turn, developed. And
Judge Collier is a guy with the traits, in-state guy, camp offer, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's going to be fascinating to see how many of those guys end up being, when you look back on this defense a couple of years from now, how many of them get drafted off of the bunch that's in the rotation right now. Probably most of them, actually, potentially. I think Collier, with those traits, as he keeps developing, he might be an NFL guy too.
Yeah.
I think Vakari Swain, obviously not an in-state guy, but somebody we've talked about with you in the past. He has started to come on a little bit as well. All right, let's close it out. A couple more guys on 2025 class. Is there anybody, Charles, that we have not talked about that maybe you just want to talk about? I thought if nobody comes to mind, let me point you in the direction of Josh Smith at Dutch Fork, who I thought was kind of a resourceful kind of late get for Carolina. I know he seems like was playing more edge early in his career, but then has kind of shown he can play in space some at Dutch Fork this year. What did you like about him, or is there anybody else you kind of want to talk about, man?
Yeah, there's several guys. I'll start with Josh Smith. Josh Smith, like you said, Wes, was playing edge his junior year, is playing off ball now at Dutch Fork. And I think that kind of changes how you view him as a prospect. He's 6'2", 230. He has the athleticism, really good length. And I think he looks like a natural, like moving around in space, hyper physical. I think he fits exactly what South Carolina likes at linebacker. When you look at the linebackers on this team right now, the guys who are busting through the gaps, like physical run support. I think he fits that. And I remember when we were going through catching up on Group of 5 classes, he was committed to Coastal Carolina, and he was a guy that like kind of jumped out. Like you're kind of, whenever we go through and watch these G5 prospects, Cody and I will always kind of make notes like, power 4 is probably going to come in on this guy. And Josh Smith was one of those. So I think, super resourceful in-state eval as a senior. And I think the circumstances of him changing positions is huge. I mean, like we talked about Jaquel Holman, I think in the past, like I just like love the athlete. Obviously he's at Batesburg, he's at Blackville Hill, a small school, but two-way player, state champion in the 100, 200. I think he could play, I guess, maybe multiple positions, but it ultimately growing into a linebacker, kind of like a true sideline to sideline type of guy. Really like him. Continue to like him. Let's see. I think DeMarcus Leach is one who is really interesting. I'm looking to hopefully just see more, learn more about him, but playing quarterback at Abbeville, but I think has the traits and the size and fits what South Carolina likes at safety. And I think he's one who I'm looking forward to continue to evaluate. But if he were to remain a 3-star, I think he would be a guy that like you would maybe tab as one who could potentially outplay his ranking. Let's see. But yeah, I think it's a good year in state, and those were guys. Oh, I'll also add too, I think Anthony Addison has had good senior film. When we were going through watching it, like he's had a very productive year at Sumter. And I think South Carolina's done a great job with this group, kind of in the front 7 edge class. And if they were able to land a guy like Kevin Wynn, that would be kind of a monster addition. Probably, I would think like wide receiver, and I guess the front 7 would probably be priorities for them in this cycle, given what just the team needs. But but yeah, I think they've done a great job with kind of evaluating and targeting those key areas.
Charles, we'll let you get out of here shortly, man. Hey, I was curious when you were talking, do you guys, when y'all are doing the rankings, do you at all factor in like, hey, I've seen that coach kind of target guys in the past and I know that they're a great evaluator, or do y'all try to keep your thought process completely independent from, who's recruiting them or what that process may look like? The only reason I ask is, when you bring up a DB, Torian Gray has just kind of like, we kind of have this thing where we're kind of like, well, if Torian Gray offers a guy, he's almost gotten a little bit of a benefit of the doubt around here because he's had so many under the radar guys that have ended up working out so far at South Carolina.
Yeah. You definitely notice stuff like that. That's not something we like. That's not a front of mind thing when we're evaluating these guys, especially in the transfer portal era, because you just like are never going to know where these guys are going to end up playing nowadays. But I think it's not something we factor into our rankings, but it's something that you notice. And it's kind of just like, it might be like maybe reassuring if you think, okay, I see this thing, and these college coaches, tend to agree, or maybe if you notice something, you're like, okay, well, I'm going to take a closer look at this guy, but it's not something that we don't really, that's not a front of mind thing. But, we were like, Cody and I were talking earlier, we were talking about like Sellers and Sam Levitt. It's really a unique circumstance with that at quarterback. A lot like the quarterback evals are so early nowadays. If we were to rank quarterbacks off of offers, we would be really wrong nowadays. So it's interesting, but we try to keep it generally what we're seeing. But of course, like any kind of feedback, like we'll definitely accept and want and consider it. But at the end of the day, what we're doing is a little different from colleges because we're ranking everybody in the country,
right?
Not necessarily building one team or one position group. So, so I would say a little bit, but that's not a major factor.
Makes sense.
But I will say Torian Gray's done a great job, and he was doing that at Virginia Tech back in the day too. So
yeah. And we always talk. It's like this weird mix between, oh, he's got Carolina involved with some just blue chipper, just everybody in the country wants him, and then actually there's this other guy that it's like them and two smaller programs, and then it's just like a very wide board of different backgrounds and types of prospects, which I think is kind of interesting because he's been able to just fit it together to where it ends up making sense. Hey, real quick, Charles, any thoughts on just in general the 2026 in-state South Carolina class? I guess Murph and Gidron no longer counting towards that, but I think especially when we were talking about those two guys as 2026 is like there's some just early known talent for this Palmetto State class for 26.
Yeah, there is. And I think guys that South Carolina has put himself in good position with, right? Jazavian Currents is of course committed. He is a jumbo athlete type. I really could see him becoming a linebacker. I mean, guys, he's a big boy. Like he was 6'3", 210 in the off season. But he's a guy, I think you get him on campus and see where he fills out. But obviously has like a lot of skill, great high school player at South Point. Obviously that's a program, of course, is synonymous with NFL talent and stars, South Carolina stars. So I think you had to be super pleased with him. I was really impressed when we were doing our update. I was really impressed with Zion Giles. Like I think it's a good year at offensive line. I think the state of South Carolina has had a good bit of O-line talent the last 3-4 cycles. And I think 2026 looks good as well. And really like Zion Giles out of Carver's Bay. I think he's athletic. He's got good size. He's not going to need to add a ton, I don't think, by the time he gets on campus. And he's one who I think could really, potentially make an early impact. within his first couple years in college, just with his athleticism and functional strength. So he was one that we moved up into the top 100. I think he's currently our number one player in the state of South Carolina. Jamel House, of course, another one who's committed. Good tight end for Newberry. You're kind of a athletic type that you can move around, and I think he fits what South Carolina does, what Dowell Loggins does on offense with how they've moved around Josh Simon and some of the other tight ends. So I think he's a really nice addition to that room. And I liked Contavion Anderson too from Dorman. He's one who I think I could see him potentially a safety, potentially ending up in the 4-star mix once we get a little more on him. I was really impressed with his film. He's at 89. He's like the highest grade for a 3-star. So he would be one that I would watch as well. But it looks like a pretty good group, and I'm sure we'll see a lot more names emerge, in 26. I think the state of South Carolina in general, you have you see some top prospects or just power 4 type of talents maybe emerge a little later than some other states. Like there's so many examples over the years, but I always try to keep up with the guys who are popping up as seniors late in the process. So I would keep an eye out for that, but it looks like a good in-state group early on.
Charles, it's been fun, man. As always, appreciate you taking the time. Hopefully I'll run into you in person, maybe Shrine Bowl or something. I don't know, man, but
I might try to get the Shrine Bowl this year. I am going to Alabama, Mississippi, so I might try to swing both possibly, depending on if we can get some guys, get some guys worth going to see out there and making sure everybody's playing. So, but that'll be fun. And hopefully I can make it over there. Not too far of a drive from Nashville. So,
yep, no doubt, man. Enjoyed it as always. Let's chat again soon. Okay, man.
Sounds good.
All right. It's Charles
Thanks,
Power.
Charles.
Go check him out, of course, on On3, and doing a fantastic job as always, keeping us updated. And, the Lenore Sellers thing, man, we had to talk a while about that, because I did not realize that Lenore's had broken into 4-star territory on some other platforms.
Yes.
Wondering how late that happened. I don't know.
I was going off of our database that has the other rankings. So I wasn't trying to throw shade, I was just trying to credit Charles. Wasn't throwing shade at anybody else, but guess I kind of feel bad now that said
you
that
just have to
those
say
other
respectfully first, and then
no disrespect.
or I'm going to start saying disrespectfully.
Disrespect intended. Yes.
Disrespectfully, South Carolina is a 42.5 point favorite over Wofford this week, which again is a huge number. I'm gonna be honest, guys. We're gonna let Charles have carried the show today. I'm not gonna pretend there was like a ton to get to from the press conference. There really just wasn't. So we're not gonna make it up. We're not gonna keep you here longer with no substance. We'd like for you to get substance from the show. So, Chris, unless you've got some just vast other thoughts to throw at us, I think we're just going to let Charles. I mean, that was a lot to process.
That was a lot. That was a lot. We need to get, everybody needs time. We got to go rewatch it. Jot down
highly detailed,
notes.
right?
Yes, very detailed as always. That's why we have him. That's why we like him.
Excellent information. And, dude, I always the fact he went to DeMarcus Leach, maybe something to keep an eye on there for South Carolina. He's obviously extremely high on maybe some of the evaluations South Carolina has done in this class in the state of South Carolina. But as always, appreciate Charles. He's the man. Great stuff. Great time from him. Of course, as we always tell you, appreciate Clint Hammond as well, our main presenting sponsor here on the show from CMG Home Loans. And for Chris, I am Wes. I'll be back. Chris will be back on Thursday. You will hear at some point tomorrow on Wednesday from Kendall and Jack. So be on the lookout for that here on GC Live. All right, y'all. Appreciate it as always. Y'all have a good one.